He didn't just ask her to leave. He slid the divorce papers across the table, poured champagne for her best friend, and introduced her as the woman who would replace his wife. "Sign it, Elena," Marcus said, calm and cold. "You were never meant for this life." To him, she was nothing. No money, no influence, no future. What he didn't know was that the house, the company, and everything he relied on had already begun shifting into her control, and Elena didn't argue. She simply picked up the pen. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hours earlier, everything had still looked like a marriage worth saving. Elena stood in the wide glass kitchen of the Whitmore estate, the morning light spilling across marble counters she had never chosen and never claimed as hers. The house was quiet, too quiet for a place that hosted weekly dinners and constant guests. She wrapped her fingers around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, her eyes drifting toward the driveway where Marcus's car had already disappeared. He hadn't said goodbye that morning. He hadn't said much at all for weeks. The silence between them wasn't sudden. It had grown slowly, almost politely, like something neither of them wanted to name. At first, it was longer hours at the office, then missed dinners, then the way he stopped asking her opinion on anything that mattered. And then there was Lydia. Elena closed her eyes briefly at the thought. Lydia had once been the person she trusted most in this house. The one who knew how uncomfortable Elena felt among Marcus's polished world of investors, executives, and carefully curated conversations. Lydia had laughed with her in the kitchen, borrowed her things, listened when Marcus became distant, until she didn't. A faint buzz broke the stillness. Elena glanced down at her phone on the counter. A new email had arrived. No subject line, just a secure sender address she didn't immediately recognize. She hesitated. Then she turned the phone face down. Not now. She already knew enough to understand that whatever was inside that message didn't belong in this house, not yet. Footsteps echoed faintly from the hallway. Elena straightened just as the housekeeper passed by, giving her a polite nod that carried a trace of something else. Respect, maybe. Or something closer to hesitation. It wasn't the first time. There had been moments like that over the past year. Small, almost invisible moments. A senior partner at one of Marcus's events who held her gaze just a second too long. A quiet correction in a financials report she had made that no one acknowledged, but that had later saved a deal from collapsing. A lawyer who once addressed her as Ms. Hartwell instead of Mrs. Whitmore before quickly correcting himself. Marcus never noticed, or if he did, he dismissed it. To him, Elena was simple, quiet, decorative, safe. By late afternoon, the house had changed. Staff moved more quickly. Voices carried further down the halls. Something was happening. Elena didn't need to ask what. She heard Marcus's voice before she saw him. Confident, controlled, the voice he used in boardrooms and negotiations. "And it's done," he said. When she stepped into the dining room, everything was already arranged. His parents sat at the long table, their posture rigid with approval. Lydia stood beside Marcus, one hand resting lightly against his arm, as if she had always belonged there. As if Elena never had. Marcus didn't look surprised to see her. He looked prepared. "There you are," he said, gesturing toward the chair at the end of the table, not beside him, not even close. Elena didn't sit. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, his mother's thin smile, his father's quiet satisfaction, Lydia's calm, almost gentle expression that hid something sharper beneath. "This won't take long," Marcus added, sliding a folder across the polished surface toward her. Elena didn't need to open it. She already knew. "Sign it," he said. "No explanation, no apology, just an instruction, like she was an inconvenience being cleared away." His mother leaned forward slightly. "This is for the best," she said, her voice smooth. "You've never quite fit here, Elena. It's time to be realistic." Lydia said nothing. She didn't need to. Her presence was the answer. Marcus poured a glass of champagne and handed it to Lydia. Their fingers brushed. Neither of them pulled away. Elena watched it all in silence. The room waited for something from her. Tears, anger, a plea, anything that would confirm what they believed about her. Instead, she reached for the pen. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, just for a second. Not because she resisted, because she didn't. The tip of the pen touched the paper. Her name formed smoothly, without hesitation. Elena Hart. No trembling, no pause. When she finished, she placed the pen down exactly where she had picked it up. "That's it?" Lydia asked softly, unable to hide the edge of surprise. Elena finally looked at her. Not with anger, not with pain, with clarity. "It's done," Elena said. She turned and walked toward the door before anyone could respond. Behind her, the room exhaled. Relief, satisfaction, victory. They thought they had won. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. Elena stepped onto the driveway, the heavy doors closing behind her with a final echoing sound. For a moment, she stood there. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. The unread email still waited. This time she opened it. A single line appeared on the screen. "Transfer confirmed, awaiting your authorization." Elena stared at the words, her expression unreadable. Then she tapped a number already saved in her contacts. The line rang once. "Mr. Calder," she said quietly, when it connected. "I'm ready." The line went quiet after Elena spoke, but not empty. There was a presence on the other end, steady and waiting, like someone who had expected this moment long before she had. "I understand," Mr. Calder replied, his voice measured, almost careful. "Are you in a secure location?" Elena glanced back at the house. Through the tall windows, she could still see movement. Marcus pouring another drink, Lydia laughing too easily, his parents leaning in close as if the night had already erased her. "No," she said, "but I won't be here long." A pause. Then, softer, "We can arrange transportation." "That won't be necessary," Elena said. Her tone stayed even, but something inside her had already shifted. "Just confirm the timeline." "It's already in motion," Mr. Calder said. "Final authorization requires your verbal consent. After that, the transfer structure becomes active. There will be no reversal without your approval." Elena closed her eyes briefly. She understood what that meant. Not just legally, but practically. Whatever had been hidden for years was no longer waiting. It was moving. "Send me the documents," she said. "I'll review them tonight." "They've been sent to your encrypted account," he replied. "And Elena, you should know, once this is executed, certain parties will begin to notice. It won't stay quiet forever. It was never meant to," she said. When the call ended, she didn't move right away. The cool air pressed against her skin, grounding her. For the first time that night, she let herself feel it. Not the humiliation, not the anger, but the clarity. She had been underestimated for a long time. That part was over. A car pulled up at the edge of the driveway. Not the kind Marcus would have called for. No polished driver, no corporate insignia. Just a quiet sedan. Elena stepped inside without hesitation. "Where to?" the driver asked. She gave an address she hadn't spoken out loud in years. The apartment was small, tucked into a quiet building that most people in Marcus's world wouldn't even notice. She had kept it under her own name, not for secrecy, but for independence. A place that didn't belong to his family, his money, or his expectations. When she unlocked the door, the silence inside felt different. Honest, she set her bag down and immediately reached for her laptop. The encrypted account opened with a familiar sequence. Files appeared one by one. Legal structures, trust agreements, ownership layers mapped out with precise clarity. Names she recognized, others she didn't. At the center of it all, one designation stood out. Primary beneficiary, Elena Hartwell. She stared at it not with shock, but with recognition. Pieces that had never quite made sense before began to settle into place. The strange deference, the unexplained access, the quiet corrections that no one questioned. It had never been random. She opened the next document, a holding structure tied to multiple subsidiaries. Among them, one name made her stop. Whitmore Holdings, her ex-husband's company. Elena leaned back slowly, her fingers resting on the edge of the desk. The connection wasn't obvious at first glance. It was buried under layers of management and oversight, routed through a parent entity that Marcus would have recognized but never fully examined. He had always trusted the structure. He had never asked who controlled it. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Board notification scheduled. 6 a.m. Attendance mandatory for all regional executives. She exhaled quietly. That would include Marcus. For a moment, she imagined his face when he read it. The confusion first. Then the attempt to regain control. The assumption that it had nothing to do with her. He wouldn't connect it. Not yet. A faint knock interrupted her thoughts. Elena froze. No one should have known she was here. She moved carefully toward the door, checking the small screen before opening it. A man stood outside, older, dressed in a simple, dark coat. His not imposing, straight, his gaze steady. "Miss Hartwell," he said. Elena didn't open the door fully. "Yes?" He reached into his coat slowly and held up an identification card, legal counsel. The name matched the signature she had just seen on the documents. "Mr. Calder asked me to deliver these in person," he said, given the timing. She opened the door just enough to take the envelope. "Is there anything else?" she asked. He hesitated, just for a second. Only that the situation with Mr. Whitmore may become complicated quickly. It would be advisable to limit direct contact until after the board announcement. Elena nodded once, understood. He didn't linger, just stepped back and left. Inside, she placed the envelope on the table and opened it carefully. More documents, additional confirmations, a summary page outlining the immediate effects of activation, suspension rights, audit authority, executive oversight. She read every line, no shortcuts, no assumptions. By the time she finished, the clock on the wall had moved well past midnight. Lena stood and walked to the window. The city stretched out in front of her, distant and indifferent. Somewhere across it, Marcus was still celebrating. Still convinced he had made the right decision. Still unaware, her phone lit up again. This time, it was his name, Marcus. She watched it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. She didn't answer. The call stopped. A message followed almost immediately. "Where are you? We need to talk. This doesn't have to be complicated." Elena read it once, then set the phone down. For him, it was still about control, about keeping things simple. She turned back to the documents, her mind already moving ahead. At 6 a.m., nothing would be simple anymore. And for the first time since she had walked out of that house, Elena allowed herself a small, controlled breath. Not relief, not satisfaction. Preparation. Because in just a few hours, the man who thought she had nothing was going to learn exactly how much he had miscalculated. Marcus didn't sleep much. The celebration had lasted longer than expected. His parents had insisted on opening another bottle. Lydia had stayed close to his side. And the tension that had once filled the room, after Elena signed those papers, had dissolved into something lighter, cleaner, necessary. At least, that was how he explained it to himself. By the time he returned to his office upstairs, the house had gone quiet again. Lydia had left late, brushing her hand against his sleeve with a smile that promised continuity. His mother had reminded him twice that he had made the right decision. His father had said nothing, but the silence carried approval. Marcus loosened his tie and sat behind his desk, staring at the empty space where Elena's ring used to rest. She had taken it off before signing, not dramatically, not emotionally, just removed it. He hadn't expected that part to stay with him. His phone buzzed again, another unread message from her. No, not from her, from him. He glanced at his last message, still unanswered. "Where are you? We need to talk." "This doesn't have to be complicated." He exhaled sharply and pushed the phone aside. Of course, she didn't respond. That was Elena's way, quiet, withdrawn, avoiding confrontation until it became irrelevant. He stood and walked to the window. The ground stretched out below, perfectly maintained. Everything in its place, predictable, controlled. That was how things were supposed to be. His phone buzzed. This time, it wasn't her. Unknown number. Marcus frowned, but answered anyway. Marcus Whitmore. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore. This is Daniel Pierce from Voss Meridian Corporate Compliance." Marcus straightened slightly. "Yes? I'm calling to confirm your attendance for the emergency executive call at 6 a.m. It is mandatory." Marcus glanced at the clock. Past midnight. "Emergency? What's this regarding?" "I'm not authorized to disclose details prior to the call," the voice said. Polite but firm. "All regional executives have been notified." Marcus's jaw tightened. There was no prior notice of anything urgent. "There is now, sir." The line went quiet for a fraction of a second. Then, almost as an afterthought, "We strongly recommend you attend." The call ended. Marcus lowered the phone slowly. Voss Meridian. The name alone carried weight. Not the kind people talked about at dinners, but the kind that shaped entire industries quietly. They were investors in multiple divisions tied to Whitmore Holdings, not dominant but influential enough that ignoring them wasn't an option. He walked back to his desk and opened his laptop. Emails were already coming in. Mandatory attendance confirmed. Executive transition notice pending. Compliance oversight update. Marcus's brows pulled together. Transition? He opened the next email. No details, just a time, a link, and a list of attendees that included every senior name he recognized, and some he didn't. Downstairs, footsteps approached. His father entered without knocking, holding his own phone. "You got the notice?" Charles Whitmore asked. Marcus nodded. "What is this?" Charles's expression was tight, calculating. "I've been on calls for the last 20 minutes. No one knows anything concrete, just that the parent structure is shifting leadership." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "That doesn't affect us directly." Charles didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked further into the room, setting his phone down on the desk. "Nothing in that structure happens without consequence," he said finally. "If there's a leadership change, there's going to be a review. That means numbers, contracts, oversight." Marcus exhaled. "We're clean." Charles gave him a look that wasn't quite agreement. "We're efficient," he corrected. Marcus didn't push it. "Not tonight." "Either way," Charles continued, "be on that call. Listen more than you talk." Marcus nodded, though irritation flickered beneath the surface. The timing was inconvenient. He had just finalized the divorce, just cleared a complication that had been holding him back. He didn't need another one. After his father left, Marcus sat alone again. The room felt different now, less controlled. His phone buzzed once more. A message from Lydia. "Everything okay? Your mom said something about a call." Marcus typed quickly. "Just corporate noise, nothing serious." He hesitated, then added, "I'll handle it." He set the phone down and stared at the screen of his laptop again. Executive transition. The words lingered. Something about it felt off, but not enough to connect it to anything real. Certainly not to Elena. Across the city, Elena closed her laptop and stood still for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. She had read every document twice. Every clause. Every condition. There were no surprises left. Only decisions. Her phone buzzed again. Not Marcus this time. A calendar update. Executive call, 6 a.m. Chair authorization required. Elena's gaze lingered on the last line. Chair. She hadn't accepted it yet. Not formally. Not publicly. But the system was already moving as if she had. She walked to the small kitchen and poured herself a glass of water, her mind steady, focused. This wasn't about proving anything to Marcus. Or his family. This was about control and responsibility. Her phone lit up again. A secure message this time. Final confirmation needed before 5:30 a.m. Without it, transition will be delayed. Elena stared at the message. Delay would give her more time, more distance, more space to think. But it would also give Marcus and his family time to adjust, to prepare, to protect themselves before the system shifted under them. She set the glass down slowly. No, they had made their decision. She would make hers. Elena picked up her phone and typed a short reply. Proceed as scheduled. The message sent instantly, no hesitation. She placed the phone down and looked out the window, the city still dark, unaware of what was about to unfold. At exactly 5:58 a.m., her phone vibrated again. A single notification appeared on the screen. Transition protocol initiated. Please join the call. Elena didn't move right away. Then she reached for the device and accepted. The screen lit up with faces one by one. Marcus adjusted his posture, forcing his expression into something neutral as he joined the call. His parents were already seated in the living room downstairs, watching the same feed projected across the large display. Lydia sat beside his mother, silent but attentive, as if she already belonged in decisions that had nothing to do with her. "Everyone's here," Charles muttered under his breath. Marcus didn't answer. His focus stayed on the grid of executives filling the screen. Names he recognized, others he didn't. Senior figures from divisions he had only interacted with through reporters and filtered meetings. At exactly 6 a.m., the call began. No introductions, no small talk. A man appeared at the center of the screen. Late 60s, composed, his presence quiet but absolute. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Nathaniel Calder, representing the Voss Meridian Trust." Marcus's brows tightened slightly. He had heard the name before. Not publicly, not casually, but in the kind of conversations that happen behind closed doors. Legal oversight, strategic control. The people who didn't show up unless something had already been decided. This call has been convened, Calder continued, to formally announce an executive transition within the controlling structure of Voss Meridian and its associated holdings. A ripple moved through the participants. Not loud, but visible. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Executive transition, so it was real. Effective immediately, Calder said, all operational authority, financial oversight, and executive accountability will be reviewed under new leadership. Marcus's jaw tightened, that word again. Reviewed. Beside him, his father shifted. Not comfortable, not yet alarmed, but aware. Calder didn't rush. He let the silence settle before continuing. The previous structure operated under interim directives following the absence of a direct successor. That period has now concluded. Marcus frowned. Absence of a successor? He had heard rumors over the years. That Voss Meridian had no clear heir. That control was dispersed. That decisions were made through layers of trustees. It had always seemed distant, irrelevant to his position, until now. The controlling authority has been formally transferred, Calder said. All executive divisions, including Whitmore Holdings, will be subject to immediate compliance evaluation under the new structure. The room behind Marcus went still. His mother's hand tightened slightly around the armrest. Lydia glanced between them, trying to read the shift. Marcus spoke before he could stop himself. What exactly does that mean for regional directors? Calder's gaze moved slightly, not directly to him, but enough. It means, he said calmly, that all regional decisions will now be accountable to a single authority. Marcus exhaled slowly. And who is that authority? A brief pause, not hesitation, timing. Calder inclined his head slightly. You will be formally introduced. The screen shifted. Marcus leaned back instinctively, his eyes narrowing as the center feed adjusted. The image was still dark. A silhouette at first, then clearer. A figure seated in a quiet room, backlit soft light from a window. Marcus frowned. Something about the posture felt familiar. Too familiar. The camera adjusted again. And then, Elena. No. Marcus blinked hard. It couldn't be. But she was there. Seated calmly, her expression composed, her gaze steady as she looked directly into the camera. Not the woman who had stood at the end of his table the night before. Not the woman who had signed his papers in silence. Something else. Calder's voice cut clean through the silence. Allow me to introduce Ms. Elena Hartwell, acting authority under the Voss Meridian Trust. The words didn't land all at once. They fractured. Marcus felt it before he understood it. A break in something he had assumed was stable. His mother spoke first, barely above a whisper. That's not possible. Lydia didn't say anything. Her eyes stayed locked on the screen, confusion turning into something sharper. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low. This is some kind of mistake, but no one on the call reacted like it was. Elena didn't correct it. She didn't explain. She simply held the silence, and then she spoke. Good morning. Her voice was the same, calm, even controlled. But there was no hesitation in it. I'll keep this brief, she continued. All divisions will proceed as scheduled this morning. No immediate operational changes will be made without review. Marcus's chest tightened. She spoke like she's belonged there, like she had always belonged there. That includes Whitmore Holdings, she added, her eyes shifting just slightly. Not directly at him, but close enough that it felt deliberate. His father straightened beside him. We need clarification, Charles said sharply. On what authority? Calder raised a hand slightly, not interrupting, but stopping him anyway. Mr. Whitmore, he said calmly, the authority has already been established. Charles went silent. Marcus stared at the screen, his thoughts scrambling to catch up. This didn't make sense. Elena had nothing, no background, no connections. No, his mind stopped, no visible ones. A memory surfaced it, small, insignificant at the time. A lawyer at a corporate dinner who had addressed her first. A document she had glanced at and quietly corrected. The way she never seemed surprised by financial discussions she wasn't supposed to understand. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. On the screen, Elena continued. All department heads will submit updated reports within 48 hours, she said. Compliance reviews will begin immediately after. Her tone didn't change, but the meaning did. Marcus understood it instantly. Review. Audit. Sharper this time. Elena, she didn't respond, not to his name, not to his voice. She simply continued, as if he hadn't spoken at all. Further details will be distributed through official channels. That will be all. The screen went dark. The call ended. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Absolute. Marcus stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's not real," his mother said, shaking her head. "That's not." His father didn't respond. He was already reaching for his phone. Lydia finally spoke, her voice tight. "Marcus, what is this?" Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't, because for the first time since the night before, something had shifted beyond his control, and he had no idea how far it went. His phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown. He opened it. A single line. Preliminary audit request issued. Whitmore Holdings flagged for review. Marcus stared at the screen, then slowly looked up, because somewhere across the city, the woman he had just divorced had just decided to look into everything he had built. The silence after the call didn't break all at once. It cracked. Marcus stood in the middle of the living room, his phone still in his hand, the message about the audit glowing faintly on the screen. His mother hadn't moved. Lydia looked like she had been pulled out of a different reality and dropped into this one without warning. Charles Whitmore was the first to act. "Get me legal," he said sharply, already dialing. His voice had changed. Not loud, but urgent in a way Marcus had never heard before. Marcus turned slowly. This doesn't make sense. No one answered him, because it did. That was the problem. His father stepped aside, speaking into the phone in a low, controlled tone. Words like structure, authority, and review exposure slipped through in fragments. Marcus didn't listen. He couldn't. His mind had gone somewhere else. Backward, to every moment he had dismissed. Elena sitting at the dining table, reading reports he assumed she didn't understand. Elena asking quiet questions about numbers that didn't seem important at the time. Elena correcting a detail once, just once, and then never doing it again after he brushed her off. He had called it harmless curiosity. He had been wrong. Lydia stood up slowly. "Marcus, you knew about this?" He turned to her sharply. No. The answer came too fast, too absolute, because if he had known, none of this would have happened. Lydia crossed her arms, her composure slipping for the first time. "Then how does your ex-wife end up running a structure your company answers to?" "She doesn't," Marcus said, his voice tightening. "There's something else going on." But even as he said it, he knew how it sounded. Like denial. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Internal memo. Division heads are required to submit financial disclosures within 48 hours. Non-compliance will result in suspension of authority. Marcus stared at it. 48 hours. That wasn't routine. That was pressure. Charles ended his call and turned back toward them, his face pale beneath the control. "We're not dealing with a surface-level transition," he said. "This is a full audit structure, top-down." Marcus clenched his jaw. "We've handled audits before. Not like this," Charles said flatly. The words landed harder than anything else. Lydia stepped closer to Marcus, her voice lower now. "What does that mean for you?" Marcus didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, he didn't know. Across the city, Elena closed the call interface and sat in stillness. The room hadn't changed. The same quiet apartment, the same dim morning light pressing through the window. But the weight of it had shifted. She wasn't observing anymore, she had acted. Her phone buzzed gently on the table. Messages from the system, confirmations, scheduled follow-ups. Structured, precise. Everything was moving exactly as it was designed to. Mr. Calder's name appeared again. She answered this time without hesitation. "It's done," he said. Elena nodded slightly, even though he couldn't see her. "I saw. There will be resistance," he added, "especially from those who believed they had informal control." "They don't," she said simply. "No," he agreed. "But they believed they did. That makes them unpredictable." Elena stood and walked toward the window, looking out over the waking city. "What's the timeline on Whitmore Holdings?" she asked. "A preliminary review has already been flagged," he said. "Their division will be among the first evaluated." Elena didn't react outwardly, but something inside her sharpened. Not revenge, alignment. "Keep it procedural," she said. "No deviations." "Of course." A brief pause. Then, more carefully, do you intend to meet with them directly? Elena considered the question. Marcus's face on the screen, his voice cutting through, trying to assert control where none remained. No, she said. Not yet. Understood. When the call ended, she didn't move immediately. She thought about the night before. Not the humiliation. Not the words. The certainty. Marcus had been so certain when he handed her those papers. So sure that she had nothing to stand on. That walking away meant losing everything. He hadn't even asked where she would go. Elena exhaled slowly. That was the part that stayed with her. Not cruelty, indifference. Her phone lit up again, a notification from the compliance system. Whitmore Holdings, internal financial variance detected. Flag level increased. Elena's eyes moved across the line once. Then again. Variance. She walked back to the table and opened the secure file. Numbers appeared. Patterns. Deviations that didn't align cleanly with reported outcomes. Subtle, but not invisible. She leaned forward slightly, her focus narrowing. Marcus had always trusted his father's oversight. Trusted the structure. Trusted that things were handled at levels he didn't need to question. Elena traced one line with her finger across the screen. Then another. A connection began to form. Not complete. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a direct message, requesting authorization to expand audit scope on Whitmore Division. Elena didn't respond immediately. She read the summary again, the flagged entries, the indirect transfers, the accounts that didn't quite match the narrative Marcus had always presented. This wasn't about punishment. It was about truth. She typed slowly. Approved. Limit access to senior compliance only. The message sent. No hesitation. Elena leaned back, her expression unchanged. Because now, the situation wasn't just about what Marcus had done. It was about what he didn't know. And what he had never bothered to look at. Across the city, Marcus stood in his office again, staring at the same message on his screen. Financial disclosures. 48 hours. He opened his internal reports, pulling up summaries he hadn't reviewed personally in months. His father had always handled those details. Marcus trusted him. He still did. But something didn't sit right anymore. He scrolled through the numbers quickly, then slowed. There. A small inconsistency. Nothing obvious, nothing alarming on its own, but it was there. He leaned closer, his jaw tightening. Marcus? He turned. Lydia stood at the door. I think we need to talk about what this means, she said carefully. Marcus looked back at the screen, then at her. For the first time, something in his voice shifted. Not confidence. Concern. Yeah, he said quietly. We do, because somewhere in the system now reviewing everything he had built, Elena wasn't just watching. She was looking deeper. And what she was starting to find wasn't something he could control anymore. Marcus didn't leave the office for the next 2 hours. The house moved around him, his mother pacing, Lydia speaking in hushed tones on the phone, his father making call after call, but none of it settled into anything useful. Every conversation ended the same way. No one had answers. He sat at his desk, the audit notice still open, the flagged entries blinking quietly in the corner of his screen. What had looked like minor inconsistencies minutes ago now felt heavier, not because they had changed, because the context had. He opened another file, then another. Contracts, vendor reports, payment schedules, everything his father had overseen. Everything he had trusted without question. At first, it still looked clean, structured, logical. Then he slowed down. Numbers that repeated where they shouldn't. Margins slightly inflated across multiple quarters. A vendor name that appeared under different subsidiaries but traced back to the same registration ID. Marcus leaned closer. That's not right, he muttered. The door opened without knocking. Charles stepped in, his expression sharp. We have a problem. Marcus didn't look up immediately. I'm seeing that. Charles walked over, placing a printed report on the desk. Compliance is requesting direct access to our internal ledgers. Not summaries, full records. Marcus's fingers paused on the keyboard. That's standard for an audit. No, Charles said quietly. Not at this level. Marcus looked up then. What aren't you telling me? Charles held his gaze for a moment, just long enough. Then looked away. It's not that simple, he said. Marcus stood abruptly. Then make it simple. The silence stretched. For the first time, Marcus saw something he hadn't expected in his father's face. Not confidence. Calculation. We've made adjustments over the years, Charles said carefully. Operational decisions, strategic flexibility, nothing illegal. Marcus's jaw tightened. That's not what this looks like. Charles's voice sharpened. Because you're looking at it without context. Marcus gestured at the screen. Then give me the context. But Charles didn't. Instead, he picked up the report and tapped a section. This is what they're going to see first, he said. If they dig deeper, they'll misinterpret it. They? Marcus repeated. Charles didn't answer, because they both knew who that meant now. Across the city, Elena sat in a quiet conference room on the top floor of a building that didn't carry a public name. She hadn't gone back to the apartment, not after the call. Mr. Calder stood across from her, reviewing the same reports that were now appearing on Marcus's screen. The pattern is consistent, he said. It doesn't point to a single event. It's structural. Elena didn't respond immediately. Her eyes moved across the data, slower than before. More deliberate. Not searching. Confirming. They won't admit it, Calder added. I'm not asking them to, she said. He nodded slightly. The audit team is requesting permission to escalate. Elena leaned back in her chair, her hands resting lightly on the table. Limit exposure, she said. No public action yet. Calder studied her for a moment. You're giving them time. I'm giving the process time, she corrected. There was a difference. Calder inclined his head. Understood. Elena turned her attention back to the screen. Whitmore Holdings. She remembered the way Marcus used to speak about it. The pride in his voice. The certainty that everything under his name was earned, controlled, clean. He had believed it. That was the part that complicated everything. Her phone buzzed, a new alert. Secondary accounts identified. Linked entities under review. Elena opened the file. The connections were clearer now. Not obvious at first glance, but once traced, impossible to ignore. Funds moving through layers that masked origin, not crude. Careful. Someone had known exactly how far they could go without triggering attention. Until now. She closed the file slowly. Prepare a summary for internal review, she said. No conclusions yet. Just facts. Calder nodded. And Mr. Whitmore? Elena's expression didn't change. Include him, she said. Back at the house, Marcus stared at the same pattern unfolding in front of him. He had pulled more data now. Cross-referenced accounts. Compared quarterly reports against internal transfers. The inconsistencies weren't isolated. They connected. Dad, he said slowly, these accounts, why are they routed like this? Charles didn't answer right away. He walked to the window, his back to Marcus. It was necessary, he said finally. For what? For stability? Charles replied. For growth. For maintaining leverage in situations where direct reporting would have limited us. Marcus shook his head. That's not stability. That's exposure. Charles turned then, his patience thinning. You think this company runs on perfect transparency? You think every division out there plays clean? That doesn't make this right. No, Charles said. It makes it real. The words hung in the air. Marcus looked back at the screen, then at his father. For years he had trusted him. Delegated. Assumed. Now he wasn't sure what he was looking at anymore. His phone buzzed again. Another message. Not internal this time. Official. Whitmore Holdings. Executive presence requested for preliminary review session. Attendance required. Marcus stared at it. Then opened the details. Time. Location. And one line that made his grip tighten. Chair oversight confirmed. He didn't need to read the name. He already knew. Marcus lowered the phone slowly, because the audit wasn't just reviewing his company anymore. It was bringing him face to face with the one person he had already dismissed, and this time, he wouldn't be the one in control of the room. Marcus arrived 10 minutes early. He didn't trust himself to walk in at the last second. The building was unfamiliar. Not marked with a corporate logo, not listed among the usual offices tied to Voss Meridian. Quiet, controlled. The kind of place designed for decisions that didn't need witnesses. A receptionist checked his name without smiling. No recognition, no deference. Conference room 3, she said. Marcus nodded once and walked past her, his steps measured, his mind sharper than it had been all morning. He had reviewed everything he could in the last few hours. Numbers, reports, internal emails, enough to understand one thing clearly. This wasn't just oversight. Something had been hidden, and now it was being uncovered. He stopped at the door, exhaled once, then stepped inside. The room was already set. Long table, clean lines, screens along the wall displaying structured data feeds, 3 people seated on one side. Legal, compliance, external audit. No one stood when he entered. Whitmore, one of them said, nodding slightly. Please have a seat. Marcus sat. No introductions followed, no small talk, just the quiet pressure of expectation. We'll begin shortly, the same man added. Marcus glanced at the empty chair at the head of the table. He didn't need to ask who it was for. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. Elena walked in, no hesitation, no pause at the threshold. She moved like she had already been there before. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. She looked the same. But she didn't feel the same. There was no trace of the woman who had stood in his house the night before. No quiet compliance, no waiting for permission, just presence. She took the seat at the head of the table. No announcement, no explanation. The room adjusted around her. Let's begin, she said. Her voice was calm, professional, unfamiliar in the way it should have been familiar all along. Marcus leaned forward slightly. We need to clarify something first. Elena didn't look at him. Clarifications will come through the process, she said. That's not how this works, Marcus replied, his tone tightening. You don't just step into. She turned her head then, not sharply, not aggressively, just enough. And he stopped. Not because she interrupted him, because something in her expression made continuing feel irrelevant. This is exactly how it works, she said quietly. Silence followed. The compliance officer cleared his throat and pulled up the first report. Whitmore Holdings has been flagged for financial variance across multiple reporting cycles, he began. We'll start with vendor alignment. Numbers filled the screen. Marcus forced himself to focus. This was his ground. Data, structure, logic. Not whatever this shift was between him and Elena. Can you explain the discrepancy in these vendor accounts? The auditor asked. Marcus glanced at the figures. He had seen them already. Those are legacy contracts, he said. Adjusted over time for operational efficiency. Adjusted how? Through negotiated margins. The auditor nodded slightly. And these linked entities? Marcus paused. That part was newer. Those fall under secondary sourcing, he said. Managed at the regional level by you? No, Marcus said. By my father. Charles Whitmore, seated further down the table, didn't react outwardly. But the shift was there, subtle, but visible. Elena's eyes moved across the screen, then to Charles. Mr. Whitmore, she said, her tone unchanged, would you like to clarify? Charles straightened slightly. These structures were implemented to maintain flexibility in vendor relationships, he said. Nothing outside industry norms. The auditor typed something into his tablet. Industry norms typically don't involve layered routing through shell entities, he said. Charles's jaw tightened. That's an interpretation. It's a pattern, the auditor corrected. Marcus felt the tension rise. This was moving faster than he expected. He glanced at Elena. She hadn't spoken again. She didn't need to. The process was speaking for her. Let's move to the next set, the compliance officer said. Another screen, more numbers. Marcus leaned in again, and then he saw it. A connection he hadn't noticed before. One of the secondary accounts linked back to an investment group, not directly, but through a chain that was just short enough to trace. He frowned. That account, he said slowly, pointing. Why is that tied to? He stopped, because he recognized the name. Lydia, not directly, but her firm, a fund she had mentioned casually once. Small, independent, nothing significant, except now it was sitting in the middle of a structure being audited. Marcus turned his head. Lydia wasn't in the room, but suddenly she was everywhere in the data. How is this connected? Marcus asked, his voice lower now. The auditor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at Elena. A brief glance. A confirmation. Elena gave a small nod. Preliminary tracing indicates financial support from one of the flagged entities into that investment vehicle, the auditor said. The scale is still under review. Marcus felt the room shift again. This wasn't just his father anymore. It wasn't just the company. It was spreading. He sat back slowly. This isn't accurate, he said, but the words lacked weight because he didn't know if they were true. Elena finally spoke again. Everything presented here is based on verifiable data, she said. Interpretation comes later. Marcus looked at her directly now. For you, maybe, he said. For us, this is our entire structure. Elena held his gaze. For a moment it almost felt like the past, like a conversation they had once had, except now, the balance was gone. "No," she said quietly, "it's not yours anymore." The words didn't land loudly, but they settled deeper than anything else that had been said. The room went still. Even the auditors paused for half a second. Marcus felt it. Not anger. Not yet. Something sharper. Realization. The control he thought he had built wasn't his. It had never been. The compliance officer continued, moving to the next section, but Marcus barely heard it. His mind had already shifted, back through every decision, every assumption. Every moment he had dismissed Elena as irrelevant to the structure he was now sitting inside of. His phone buzzed softly on the table. He glanced at it without thinking. A message from Lydia. "I need to talk to you. Now." "It's urgent." Marcus stared at the screen, then slowly looked back up, because for the first time since the audit began, he wasn't sure which part of his life was collapsing first. Marcus didn't answer Lydia right away. He watched the message sit on his screen, the words urgent and need to talk pressing harder than anything said in the room. The audit continued around him, voices steady, documents shifting, but his focus had already fractured. "Mr. Whitmore." He looked up. Elena was watching him now. Not with anger, not with judgment, just attention. "Are you still with us?" she asked. The question was simple, but it landed differently. Marcus straightened slightly. "Yes." "Good," she said, then turned her attention back to the auditor. "Continue." The moment passed, but something in Marcus didn't settle again. The review moved forward. More accounts, more connections. Nothing explosive on its own, but together forming something harder to dismiss. Patterns, dependencies, decisions made without oversight. Marcus spoke less now. When he did, it was careful, measured. Not because he wanted to control the room, but because he no longer knew what control looked like inside it. After another 30 minutes, the session paused. 15-minute break, the compliance officer said. Chairs shifted, screens dimmed slightly. Marcus stood immediately. He didn't look at Elena. He didn't look at his father. He walked out of the room and into the hallway, pulling his phone from his pocket before the door even closed behind him. He called Lydia. She answered on the first ring. "Marcus." Her voice was tight. "What's going on?" he asked. There was a pause on her end. Not hesitation, calculation. "I need to see you," she said. "I'm in the middle of something." "I know exactly what you're in the middle of," she snapped, then lowered her voice. "That's why this matters." Marcus leaned against the wall, his jaw tightening. Then another pause, then quieter. "They're looking at my accounts, too." Marcus went still. "What?" "I just got a notice," she said. "Internal inquiry, linked funding review. They're asking for documentation I don't even have access to." Marcus closed his eyes, briefly. The pattern he had seen. It wasn't just a connection. It was exposure. "Lydia," he said slowly, "how are you tied into those accounts?" "I'm not," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Not the way they're suggesting. That's not what I asked." Her breathing shifted on the line. "You said it was handled," she said instead. "You told me your father had everything structured." Marcus's grip tightened around the phone. "What did you think that meant?" "It meant I didn't have to question it," she said. "It meant I trusted you." The words hit harder than they should have, because they echoed something he hadn't wanted to hear from her, or from anyone. "You need to come see me," Lydia continued. "We have to get ahead of this before they—" "No," Marcus said. The word came out sharper than he expected. Lydia went quiet. "What?" "I can't leave," Marcus said. "Not right now." "So you're just going to sit in there while they tear everything apart?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, that question didn't feel like an accusation. It felt like a reality. "They're not tearing it apart," he said finally. "They're reviewing it." "That's the same thing," Lydia said. "No," Marcus replied quietly. "It's not." The difference mattered. He just hadn't seen it before. Lydia exhaled sharply. "You're changing your tone. I'm adjusting to facts," he said. Another silence. Then her voice shifted. Colder, less controlled. "You think she's going to protect you?" Lydia asked. "After what you did?" Marcus didn't respond, because the answer didn't matter. This wasn't about protection. It was about consequence. "You need to decide where you stand," Lydia said. "Because if you don't act, they're going to define this for you." Marcus looked back toward the conference room door. He could still hear the faint movement inside. Voices. Order. Structure. He thought about the way Elena had sat at the head of the table. Not performing power. Holding it. "I'll call you later," he said. Marcus. He ended the call. For a moment, he stayed where he was, the phone still in his hand. Then he pushed himself off the wall and walked back toward the room. Inside, Elena hadn't moved. She was standing now, speaking quietly with one of the auditors, reviewing something on the tablet in front of her, focused, unshaken. Marcus stopped just inside the door. She noticed. Of course she did. Her eyes lifted, meeting his for a brief second. No reaction. No acknowledgement beyond that, just awareness. He walked back to his seat. The session resumed. "Before we continue," the compliance officer said, "we need to address a newly flagged connection." Marcus felt it before he saw it. The screen shifted. A new document appeared, expanded, tracing, clearer mapping. The structure that had been abstract minutes ago now laid out in direct lines. Vendor accounts, secondary routing, and at the end, a consolidated transfer point. Marcus leaned forward. "That's not," he stopped, because the name attached to the final node wasn't unfamiliar anymore. It was undeniable, his father's Hughes signature authorization. Dated, repeated. Charles Whitmore didn't move. But the silence around him changed. Elena's voice cut through it. "Mr. Whitmore," she says calmly, "we'll need you to explain this authorization." Charles looked up slowly. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he did. And his answer didn't sound like confidence anymore. It sounded like defense. Marcus felt something settle inside him. Not panic, not anger, something quieter, clearer, because the situation had just crossed a line, and there was no way back to what it had been before. His phone buzzed again. He didn't check it this time. He didn't need to, because everything he needed to see was already on the screen in front of him. The room felt different when it was over. Not louder, not quieter, just settled. The audit didn't explode into chaos the way Marcus had feared. It moved forward, step by step, each finding documented, each decision traced. His father's authorizations were reviewed under counsel. Lydia's accounts were flagged for external compliance review. Nothing was buried, nothing was rushed, and nothing could be undone. Marcus stood at the edge of the boardroom long after most people had left. The chairs were empty now, the screens dimmed, the weight of everything still hanging in the air. He saw it clearly, the pattern, the warnings he ignored, the woman he dismissed, and the cost of all of it. The door opened quietly behind him. Elena stepped back in, not as his wife, not as someone seeking anything from him. She walked in like she belonged there because she did. Marcus turned. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he exhaled. "So it's all true." Her gaze didn't shift. It always was. He let out a dry breath, something between a laugh and regret. "The holding, the ownership, the approvals, all of it." "Yes, and you knew," he said. "Even back then, Elena didn't rush to answer. I knew enough that I was building something on top of a system I didn't control. That you were part of something bigger than you understood," she said, calmly. Marcus nodded slowly. The words didn't feel like an accusation. They felt like fact. "I thought you didn't belong in that world," he admitted. "I thought you were, holding me back." Elena's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. Not for him, for what had been. "You didn't know what I was choosing," she said. "And what was that?" Marcus asked. She held his gaze. "You." The answer landed heavier than anything else. Marcus looked away, because that was the part he couldn't fix. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "About you. About everything." Elena didn't argue, didn't agree either. "I didn't come back here for an apology," she said. "And I didn't stay silent for revenge." And Marcus swallowed. "Then why?" She stepped closer, not threatening, not distant, just clear. "Because I needed to see what you would choose without knowing who I was," she said. "And you made your choice." There was no anger in her voice, just finality. Marcus nodded again, slower this time. "And now?" "Now," she said, "the company stabilizes. The audit continues, and everyone involved takes responsibility." He let out a breath, including me, including you. Silence settled again. But this time it didn't feel unfinished. It felt decided. Marcus hesitated before speaking again. "Is there anything left to say between us?" Elena considered the question. For a moment the room felt smaller, more personal. Then she shook her head, just slightly. "No," she said. "Not cruel, not cold, just true." Marcus absorbed it. The final line that couldn't be negotiated. "I lost you," he said. Elena didn't correct him. Because he hadn't lost her today, he had lost her the moment he chose to see her as less, the moment he replaced her, the moment he believed she had nothing. "That wasn't about money," she said quietly. "It never was." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. He understood that now. Too late. Elena stepped back, not away from him, forward into something else. "I won't dismantle everything your family built," she added, "but I won't protect it from the truth either." Marcus nodded. It was more than fair. It was more than he deserved. "And Lydia?" he asked. "She'll face whatever the audit confirms," Elena said, "like everyone else. No exceptions, no personal revenge. Just accountability." Marcus looked at her one last time, not as his wife, as someone he had never truly understood. "You don't need any of this," he said. "The company, the position, the fight." Elena met his eyes. "I don't need it," she agreed. "Then why stay?" She didn't hesitate this time, "Because I choose to." The difference was everything. She turned then, walking toward the door without rushing, without looking back, not leaving something behind. Stepping into what was hers. Marcus stayed where he was, because for the first time, he wasn't trying to follow. Outside, Elena paused for a moment in the quiet hallway, the weight of the past still there. But lighter now, not gone. Just no longer defining her. Her phone vibrated softly in her hand, a message from her attorney confirming the next steps. The transition had already begun. She looked ahead. Not at the boardroom. Not at the life she had just closed. At what came next. And she walked forward. What would you choose, revenge or self-respect, if you were her?